Descartes is often taken as the starting point, the founding father, as it were, of early modern philosophy, and we're going to follow that tradition. We're going to be starting out with Descartes. Please do remember, keep in mind that over these next few weeks, we're only looking at a very, very small number of important thinkers that lived during this period of time. There's much more going on than the small glimpse that we're going to be able to get of things. But anyway, we're going to start with Descartes, truly a revolutionary thinker whose influence is felt down to the present day. Descartes was born on March 31st, 1596. He was born in La Haye. It's a town in the central part of France. This town has since been renamed after its most famous son. It's now the town of Descartes, and so you can go visit that. Descartes was born March 31st, 1596 in La Haye. It's a town in the central part of France. It has since been renamed after its most famous son and is now named Descartes. He was sent to a Jesuit boarding school at about the age of 8. He learned Greek, Latin, the classics. Aristotle was the foundation. The Aristotelian worldview was the foundation for the understanding of nature in the tradition at the time, so he was certainly well schooled in Aristotle and all of the other classics. He also learned and took a taste for mathematics. Later on, he went to the University of Poitiers. He was expected to become a lawyer, and he studied law there, but he never practiced it. His ambition was to be a gentleman soldier, a military officer, and he went into military service several different places throughout Europe subsequently. He tells a little bit about his intellectual development in the Discourse on Method, which you're going to be reading, so you can read a little bit more about that there. He says at one point in the discourse, "As soon as I reached an age that allowed me to escape from the control of my teachers, I abandoned altogether the study of letters. Having decided to pursue only that knowledge which I might find in myself or in the great book of the world, I spent the rest of my youth traveling, visiting courts and armies, mixing with people of different character and rank, accumulating different experiences, putting myself to the test in situations in which I found myself by chance, and at all times, giving due reflection to things as they presented themselves to me so as to derive some benefit from them." So I see that Descartes tells us that he really rejected much of his education, and we're going to see that in the Meditations when we get to it fairly shortly here. Descartes' remarks about escaping the control of his teachers tell us a little something about his attitude towards the education that he had received and what value he finds or doesn't find in it. It also fits very neatly with his own philosophical enterprise. Descartes, who was known for his mathematical and scientific discoveries in his own day, saw this as the impetus for developing a brand new approach in philosophy. He thought that classical learning was outdated and could serve us no more, that theology and that the Aristotelian view of nature had to be rejected, that they were useless. He thought that we needed a philosophical theory, a theory of knowledge and an understanding of reality that would allow us, that would fit with modern scientific discoveries and with their expression through mathematics. This was a model for him, and he thought that the past simply had to be rejected. That accounts for the radical-sounding beginning that he undertakes in the meditation. Descartes says, "Several years have now passed since I first realized how many were the false opinions that in my youth I took to be true, and thus how doubtful were all the things that I subsequently built upon these opinions. From the time I became aware of this, I realized that for once I had to raise everything in my life down to the very bottom so as to begin again from the first foundations if I wanted to establish anything firm and lasting in the sciences. A couple of noteworthy things about these opening lines and about what his project is and what he undertakes to do here. First thing that we might notice is how peculiar this project sounds. Descartes is telling us that he has realized that some of the things that he was taught, some of the things that he has taken to be true, are in fact false and not so certain. So what is he going to do? He's going to try to reject everything that he has ever accepted as true before, start over absolutely from zero, from nothing. Now suppose Descartes had gone out and picked some apples in the apple orchard, got home and said, "Look, I notice there are some rotten apples in this bunch. Oh, I think I'll have to dump the entire bushel of apples and start all over again." So normally we wouldn't do anything like that. We would take out our apples, we'd inspect them, we would toss aside or cut out the ones that had some rotten spots or that had a few worms in them, and save the rest. Descartes wants to get rid of everything and start over again because he's recognized that some of the things that he was taught is probably not true. Now, the situation might be different if he had been out picking mushrooms, for example, and realized that maybe there was something in there that was poisonous. In that case, maybe he would want to stay away from the whole batch. So what he is doing is something a little bit more like the mushroom analogy than it is like the apple analogy here. He wants to start all over again because he wants to put sciences on a firm foundation. And this brings us to the second thing to notice about those opening lines there, and that is that there's a metaphor, okay, hidden in that, okay? And this is the metaphor of a building. So Descartes is conceiving of the things that he believes to be true about the world, the collection of all of those, the body of human knowledge. Descartes is conceiving that along the lines of an edifice, okay? A building that has foundations, so that everything has to be supported by something, and there's something at the foundation that supports everything else. So he's already actually not starting from zero because he's advancing a certain model for the structure of knowledge. And this is certainly inspired for him by mathematics and the natural sciences too. There's a certain model for the structure of knowledge, a model along which all of knowledge is connected together in a hierarchical form, resting upon foundations which support the entire edifice. This is not necessarily the only way to conceive of knowledge. Aristotle, for example, who saw a certain unity to knowledge, right, the Aristotle that Descartes is rejecting here, Aristotle certainly saw a unity to human knowledge, but Aristotle made distinctions of different sciences or different areas of knowledge, depending upon what the subject was, what the object of knowledge is, and different principles applied in different areas. In ethics, for example, knowledge was something that was less certain and less definitive than knowledge about other kinds of things. Descartes wants all of knowledge to be connected as part of one and the same building, and all of it resting upon the very same fundamental principles. Okay, so take two. Now, another thing we might ask about Descartes' project is how in the world is he going to do it? So if we have this idea that it's time to redecorate the mind, so to speak, okay, do a complete mental renovation here. We're just going to gut the entire interior. We're going to throw out all of the furniture, all of the wall coverings, all of the rugs and light fixtures, get rid of everything and start all over again from scratch and build up something entirely new. If we're going to undertake that as a mental enterprise, how do we even go about eliminating and rejecting, calling into doubt all of our previous opinions? We can't even probably make a list of everything that we happen to believe is true, much less systematically go through and call it all into doubt. And in fact, the procedure for calling everything into doubt, again, rests on this assumption that all of the things that we believe and everything that we think forms a body of knowledge rests upon some group of definite foundations. Okay? Just as if we were undertaking to raise a building, to make use of Descartes' metaphor. Okay? So if I have, let's say, a 7-story building and I want to tear it down, and I start at the top and I start removing one brick at a time, this is going to be a long and tedious and perhaps not very successful project. On the other hand, if I simply dynamite the foundations, then the whole building will collapse. And so that's what Descartes undertakes to do. He wants to dynamite the foundations. He wants to tear out everything that he believes as far as possible in order to find some foundations that he thinks are more certain than whatever the foundations were before.